Ever tried carrying your dog around the city only to realize that the carrier that you're using is literally killing your shoulder and your back? Yeah, I have been there. After doing a 42-day holiday market in New York City, in which I brought my dog with me every day, I realized that the sling that I had needed to go. It was not good. And I tried everything to find the right sling, and nothing on the market was what I wanted. So I decided to make my own. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Nicole and I am the founder of Hudson Houndstooth. I have over 20 plus years of design and pattern making experience, and it is my mission to create patterns for you and your pets that are size inclusive, stylish, and functional. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, definitely hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future tutorials. Meet the Skyler Pet Sling, which is what we're going to walk through how to make today. It is actually designed for all day wear. It has not only this thick, super thick padded strap that is adjustable, so it is designed to fit bodies of all shapes and sizes, but it also has a removable belt, and the belt helps to take the weight off of being solely on your shoulder and distribute some of that weight to your hip so that you can actually carry your fur baby for multiple hours without you feeling it. And if you notice that the belt isn't actually attached to the sling, that is by design. So if you, let's say you're going out for a quick outing and the belt feels a little excessive, or you're going to somewhere and you only need your pup in the sling for the travel purposes, and the rest of the time they're going to be attached to their leash walking around, and the belt feels like overkill, then you can remove it, and then you're just looking like you've got a cute crossbody sling instead of a heavy-duty dog carrier. Both the shoulder strap and the belt are fully adjustable, so regardless of how tall you are or short you are and what your size is, this sling should comfortably fit you. So you can adjust it so that it hits in the correct spot on your hips to properly function. And also they're adjustable so that depending on what time of year, like maybe you can get in the summer, but you want to keep in mind that in winter you're going to be wearing heavier sweaters and maybe a big parka, so then you can adjust it to have a little bit more room for those extra layers. Other features of the sling, it has 2 zippered welt pockets, and these are perfect for keeping all of your essentials, your wallet, your phone, everything like that, all neatly contained. I, on my sling, had like this awful patch pocket, and my phone constantly kept falling out of it every time I would like bend over or whatnot, so zippered pockets to keep it actually secure was the way to go. Plus, it also has a safety strap to keep your pup secure in the sling, as well as a D-ring here on the front strap. This is so you can clip anything that you need, like a poop bag holder or a travel bowl, let's say, anything like that, that is there for that. It also has a pillow insert, and this is to provide a little bit more structure. So if your dog really wants more security and support underneath their paws, this will provide that more like a flat bottom tote. If that's not enough for them, you can also purchase like a felt purse bottom that will actually give you that more structured bottom if you so choose to put underneath the pillow, but it will cause the sling to stick out a little bit more, so just keep that in mind. The sling comes in 2 sizes, and the straps and the belt and everything are all the same. The only difference between the 2 sizes is just the size of the bag for your pup. So if you have a smaller dog under 15 pounds, I would recommend the smaller size, and then if they're over 15 pounds, definitely the larger size. But if they're between 10 and 15 pounds, you can kind of pick and choose whether you want them to have a little bit more room or not. This sling is perfect for intermediate sewers or confident beginners that are looking to challenge themselves. This is going to be a great weekend project. We're going to cover all kinds of things like quilting and zippered welt pocket. If you haven't yet grabbed the pattern, grab it in the listing description below. I also, if you don't want to source everything, I have 2 options. I have the interfacing only and everything but the fabric. You can pick either of those if you don't want to go through all the effort to source it yourself. I will provide those things for you, just enough to make one bag. And yeah, let's get into what you're going to need for this bag. For this project, you are going to need your main body fabric, which I am using a lightweight twill. You could use a canvas, you could use a nylon, like utility fabric, upcycle denim. There's so many options, but anyways, I'm going with a durable twill. You want something that's easily washable and that is going to hold up to daily wear and tear. The other thing you're going to need is a lining fabric for inside the sling. This, again, I would recommend something super soft for your dog, but also think about washability. So micro fleece would be a good option. Teddy bear fleece would be a great option. Sweatshirt fleece. I'm going to use a flannel today. It's really, really soft. This is a very beginner friendly fabric because there will be no stretch and it's not that thick. You could also do cotton. It won't be quite as soft, but it will be washable. So that is an option as well for beginners. And then lastly, you're going to need a lining fabric for your pockets. You could do the same as this. I just think it's a waste to do the brush flannel in pockets, so I'm going to go with this. This is like a nylon fabric, so it should be very easy to clean on the inside. Regular cotton, like a quilting cotton, would be a great option for the lining. These, I feel like, have a very good vibe together, so this is what I'm going to go with, the rough fabric. You are going to need a lot of interfacings for this project because I really feel that the main structure and functionality of the bag comes down to using the correct interfacings. I know there are a lot for this project and they can be kind of difficult to source, so I did put together a kit where you can just buy the interfacings from me for just the amounts you need to do a bag. That way you don't need to source around and order a ton, because for some of them you only need a small amount. That is an option for you if you need it, but basically I'm just going to go through them. The first one that you need is a fusible fleece. It just adds a little bit of loft and structure to your and padding to the outside of your bag. It has a fusible on the one side. This will fuse to your main fabric and then you will quilt it. And then you're also going to need a fusible foam. This is going to be used on the straps, on the belt, as well as the optional pillow insert. If you choose to do it, you can see it's a lot thicker. Again, is fusible and you will quilt it in the same way. It just adds a lot more padding for the strap and the belt, which will add for your comfort. You could skip this and just do the fleece if you wanted to. It just won't quite be as padded. You're also going to need a super heavyweight interfacing. I am using Decaville Light. This provides structure for the belt as well as the pillow to help provide more of that flat bottom so that they feel a little more secure in the base of the sling, as well as it helps to prevent the belt from folding, which will help with the ability for the belt to take the weight off of your shoulder. So it is kind of important. Unfortunately, you don't need very much of this, but again, the kit is available. And just to show you kind of, I have this sample with two different heavyweight interfacings on here. The Decaville Light is just what I had on hand, so this is what I ended up ultimately going with, but you can see how it prevents it kind of from folding versus when it's just the fleece, how much easier it is to bend. So that is what this is for. And then lastly, you will need a lightweight interfacing. This is going to be used for your welt pockets and for the safety strap and D-ring tab. So just any basic, again, fusible, so it's got glue on one side. Those are all the interfacings that you need. Lastly, for the trims, you're going to need a 1.5 inch webbing, which will be for your adjustable straps and belt, as well as 2 quick release buckles. Again, these should be 1.5 to match the 1.5 inch webbing. If you struggle to find 1.5 inch, you can do 1 inch, but I will say for the belt, for comfort, the wider will be best. So if you are tiny, you might be able to get away with the 1 inch, but especially if your hips are larger, for comfort, the of 1.5 really is the best option. You're gonna need the webbing, the 2 quick release buckles, one for the shoulder, one for the belt. You will need a D-ring for the shoulder strap. This is to clip essentials like a poop bag holder or water bowl, anything like that. If you want to omit this, you absolutely can. For the shoulder strap, the front shoulder strap, it is 3 pieces. It's D, E, and F. F being the under one. D and E have the seam in order to insert the D-ring. So if you want to omit this, I would just cut 2 F pieces instead of D and E. You will also need a swivel lobster clasp for the safety strap. This is to secure your pup so that they can't jump out and injure themselves. And then you will need 2 closed-end zippers for your pockets. You will need a 4.5-inch one and a 7-inch. You can use zipper tape if you would prefer, as opposed to a closed-end zipper. Just keep in mind that closed-end zippers are measured from stopper. This is your top stop here to your bottom stop here. So when I say 4.5, that is this measurement here. So you can see that there's extra tape on either sides. So keep that in mind. If you're doing tape, you want to add at least 3/4 of an inch to both sides so that you have room to attach it into the seam. If you cut it too short, you will run into issues. So you need one 7-inch and one 4.5. You can either cut your zipper down a size or get to that size as well. For the teeth, the number, I'm doing a 4.5 denim zipper here because that's what I have on hand. You can do anything that is a number 5 or smaller will fit. The number refers to the width of the teeth in millimeters. So a number 5 is 5 millimeters. This is 4.5 millimeters. Number 3, number 4.5, or number 5 will all work for this project. And that's it. We're ready to get cutting and sewing. Again, if you need help sourcing all of this, I do have the kit. These will be the colors that you get. I've ordered silver so that it matches the silver hardware. I just don't have them yet in stock. So for today, for this tutorial, it's going to be gold and silver. Apologies for the mixed metals. It drives me nuts. But for the actual ones that I'll be making in the future, it will all be silver. It will all match. But for today, just disregard that the metals are mixed. I'm gonna go ahead and cut everything out, and then I will come back and we will get started. To save myself having to turn my projector back on later, I'm just gonna quickly fuse the lightweight interfacing to the front pocket facing and the side pocket facing, just so then I can mark where the pocket is, and then I can turn my projector off. To do this, the bumpy side is the side with the glue, so I'm just going to put that to the wrong side of the fabric. So then I can go ahead and mark on the fusible side the pocket. The outer rectangular box that you're marking is going to be your stitching guideline, and then the inside lines, which are basically these 2 little triangles with a line connecting in the center, that is going to be your cutting guideline, and that's what it's going to look like when you're done. To make quilting easier, I like to cut the fusible fleece slightly larger than the main body fabric. In this case, I'm working with the side panel C, but we are going to remove 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance from that top edge. And I like to fuse down part of the main fabric to the fleece first, just to prevent it from shifting, before I then go ahead and mark that 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and trim it away. Once it's trimmed away, then you can go ahead and fuse down the rest of the main body fabric to the fleece. Now we are doing this because to attach the straps later, it's really bulky. There's so many layers, so removing this helps to remove that bulk and make it easier. And it's way easier to do it now before quilting it and then trying to remove it after the fact. So we're going to do this for both the side panel C as well as the front A and back B. I'm doing it in the same method. I fuse down part of the main body fabric to the fleece before marking that 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance, trimming it away, and then going to fuse the rest of the piece down. Now, if you're using an extremely heavyweight fabric, you may choose to remove the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance around all 4 sides. My fabric wasn't that thick, so wasn't necessary. This would be like something for like if you were using an upholstery fabric, let's say. You're also going to remove the 3/8 of an inch from the seam allowance from the bottom of the straps. I started with the back straps G. I'm cutting the 3/8 of an inch 1 centimeter seam allowance down from the side with the notch. The upper strap has the fusible fleece. The under strap has the fusible foam. You'll notice I did not cut the fusible foam to the exact size. That was just because I was tired of cutting by the time I got to the foam. It's okay, I can cut it down after quilting. And then we're also cutting the 3/8 of an inch from the upper front strap bottom E, again the side with the notch, and well as the upper or the under front strap F. And then you can go ahead and also fuse down the belt pieces and well as the top upper strap D. For the belt channel L, you're going to locate your notches, which should be on the side towards the top. Then you're going to take your belt fleece N and you're going to place it to the wrong side of the fabric, 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter above the bottom edge, and then fuse that into place. The fusible fleece is a lot smaller on this because you only need the quilting on the front of the belt channel. Now you're ready to mark the desired quilt pattern onto the right side of your quilted pieces. I'm using a clover Hera marker because it creates more of an indent as opposed to needing to wash away chalk or water soluble heat erasable pen. I'm doing a 2" by 2" square, and if you notice, I'm only marking one line in each direction, and I'm actually using my notches as my guide for that to make it easier for lining stuff up later. Now, the reason I'm only doing one line is because I'm using this. This is a walking foot, and I'm using it in combination with this quilting guide bar. You don't need the walking foot, but the quilting guide bar is what is going to allow me to only have to mark one stitch line and use that as the guide for the rest of my stitch lines. And you can space it however you want. To install it, you're going to install it just the same way as you would a regular foot in your same spot. The only difference is like an extra little arm that goes onto the needle bar, and that's what helps create the walking foot motion. And it's the walking foot that creates, it's almost like a second pair of feed dogs that help evenly pull your fabric in through. Now I'm lining my needle up with the center line, which is that red line, and I'm going to go down my initial stitching line. And then for this, I created one secondary line just so that I could figure out my spacing, which again is 2 inches. I line up that guide bar, and then for all the rest of my stitching, I just use the previous line of stitching at lining that up with that guide bar. And that allows me to do all the rest of my quilting stitches, and you're just going to do that for all your pieces. Now for the quilting of the channel, you don't need to quilt where there is no fleece. So basically on the side that has only a half of it, I just like stop a little ways past the fusible fleece, but you don't need to go all the way to the end for that piece. But otherwise it gets quilted in the exact same way as everything else. And then you're going to go ahead and just trim away all that exable fusible fleece and fusible foam that you have on all your pieces. And then we're ready to sew it together. To prepare the D-ring tab P and safety strap Q, you're going to add the lightweight fusible interfacing to the wrong side of the fabric. And then what you're going to do is you're going to fold up the seam allowance 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter on both long sides and press them flat. And then you're going to fold the strap in half again to create a 3/4 inch strap. Now you can do the same method as this, or you can fold it in half first and then fold the outer sides in to meet that center line. Whichever is easiest for you. I am very accurate at eyeballing, and so I just find it easier to do the seam allowance first and then fold it in half. Both methods work, so it's up to you. I'm starting with the side pocket. You're going to line up with right sides together, the side pocket facing J with one of the sides. See, it doesn't matter which one. I like to use a pin to make sure that the corners of both markings are correct, and then once they are, then I'll go ahead and move the pins out of the way of where you're stitching. You're going to do the same thing with the front A and the front pocket facing H. Now we're going to stitch around that outside rectangle on the actual line itself. If you haven't already, you can change your foot back to your regular foot. And then for the stitch length, because you want to be as accurate as possible on the rectangle, so I find decreasing the stitch length down to about like a 2 is helpful in making it as accurate as possible. You want the angle of the corners to be 90 degrees. So just go slow, try and be as accurate as possible. I know some people like literally count the number of stitches on each side to make sure that both sides are the exact same. I don't do that, but you can just try and be as accurate as possible, but you're going to go all the way around until you get back to where you started. And you're going to do that for both the front pocket and well as the side pocket. Again, the more accurate that you can be on the placement of the rectangle of the pocket, the cleaner and neater it will look when you're done. Now we're going to cut along those lines. So what I like to do is fold it in half and then cut a little tiny slit, and then I'll open it back up, and you're just gonna follow that line down the center until you get to those little V's, and you're gonna snip into the V. Now you want to get as close as possible to that stitch line in that corner without cutting the thread. If you don't clip close enough to the corners, you will end up with not a crisp 90-degree corner when you turn it right side out. So if you do find that when you turn it right side out, it's not laying nicely, go back and clip closer to that corner. So once you're done cutting, I like to give it a good finger press on all 4 sides of the pocket before turning it through. I find it's just a little helpful. But then once you're doing that, then you turn it right side, or turn the facing to the wrong side of the pattern piece. And it should, especially not so much on the longer pockets in the middle of the long sides, but on those short sides, it should lay quite flat. Again, we're going to do this for both the front and side pocket. Just follow the lines and those little V's and then turn it right side out. Again, if you can see on this, those short sides are laying really nice and flat. This is without pressing. This is just all on its own. So if your pocket does not do that, I definitely recommend and try first going back and clipping closer to that corner, because it should lay pretty smoothly on those short sides, and just the longer sides towards the middle might need a little bit more coaxing. But go ahead and press the pocket opening nice and flat, and you should end up with a 1/2 inch, 1.3 centimeter rectangular opening for both the side as well as the front. You're going to do the exact same thing. And then we're ready to add the zipper. Especially if you're using a metal zipper, make sure that the entirety of the zipper, stopper to stopper, fits within that opening so that you don't run into any issues when you're stitching it in place. I'm going to use wash-away tape to baste the zipper in place. You could also use Elmer's glue or just pins, whichever, and you can also even hand baste it if you prefer. I avoid hand stitching like the plague. I love this wash away tape. So you're just gonna place one on each of the long sides, and then I like to lay the zipper down flat right sides up and then place the opening over top. You can shift, especially towards the longer middle side. It likes to open a little bit, so you might need to like push it into a straight position. But then once you are happy with the placement, just go ahead and press it all down into place, and you're good to start sewing. And you're going to do this for, again, both the front and the side pocket. The direction of the zipper is really up to you. It doesn't matter. You can have the zipper face either direction, but again, you're just going to shift that to make it perfectly straight and then press it down when you're happy. And then you're going to stitch all the way around the box. I do not like to backstitch for this for a neater look. I like to leave a long tail at the beginning and just start stitching and go all the way around, edge stitching as close to the edge as possible. A zipper foot can help you with this. When you get to the corner, you're going to leave the needle in and lift up your press foot and just make the turn. stitch until you get to the next corner and lift up and turn. And you're going to go all the way around until you get back to where you started. And again, do not backstitch. When you get close to the zipper pull, just simply open the zipper to move it out of the way and keep going as normal. Again, you're going to put your needle in the corner, lift your presser foot, turn, and keep going. And then when you get back to where you started, just go over a couple of stitches and then pull it through, leaving 2 long tails. To pull the thread to the other side, I like to just wiggle the long thread on the back until I can get a seam ripper in there and just gingerly pull. Then you're going to tie the threads in a couple of knots to secure and then trim them short, and you've got a neat zipper on the other side. Do this for both the front and the side zippers. Now we're ready to add the pocket bag. So with right sides together, you're going to sew the bottom edge of the front pocket bag I to the bottom edge of the front pocket facing H with 3/8 of an inch 1 centimeter seam allowance. You are only going to be sewing through those 2 things. You're going to fold the front A out of the way when you sew it. Now we're going to do the exact same thing with the side pocket. So you're going to take the pocket bag K and the side pocket facing J and complete the exact same step, sewing just the pocket bag and facing and folding the rest out of the way. Once you're done, you can go ahead and press the seam allowance towards the pocket bag. Looks like this. If you would like to add a grommet for a waist bag dispenser, you're going to want to do it at this step before you move on to sewing the rest of it. When you're ready, you're going to fold up the pocket bag to align the top edge of the pocket bag with the pocket facing. Again, I'm starting with the side pocket, and you're going to sew along that top edge with 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance. Again, you're only going through both the pocket bag and the facing, not the bag itself, so fold that out of the way. Now we're going to do the side seam, and you want to make sure that you're catching that little tiny triangle that we cut when we did the welt pocket into that seam. A zipper foot will help get close to that edge if you need it, and then that's what it'll look like. And you're going to do the exact same thing on the other side, and then you're going to do this exact same step for the front pocket bag with the front pocket facing. Again, you're going to fold the front A out of the way when you do this, and the side you're going to catch those little tiny triangles, and at the end you have a finished pocket. Now, because this nylon is super fraying, I'm going to go ahead and finish the edges with a pair of pinking shears. This is not entirely necessary. You are going to have it hidden within the lining, so if you want to skip that step, you can finish them however you want. Now we're going to take the bottom edge of both of the side panels C, and we are going to sew that with 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance with right sides together. And then you're going to press that seam allowance open. After we finish pressing it, we're going to top stitch on both sides of the seam approximately 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters. I'm going to line up that inside edge of my presser foot with the edge of the seam to make my stitching straight, and you're just going to do this on both sides. We are ready to move on to the belt channel. Now, to orient yourself, the bottom half will have the fleece, and then the top has a notch. You're going to find that notch on the belt channel as well as the belt channel lining, and you're going to line up one of the sides so that those notches match up. They should be the exact same length, and then you're going to sew those with right sides together with 3/8 of an inch 1 centimeter seam allowance. Then you're going to pull that lining over to the other side, match the notches again, and you're going to sew with right sides together again, 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance, that side as well. Keep in mind, the belt channel is wider than the lining. That is by design. That is to create a facing on both sides once we turn it right side out. So you're going to turn it right side out, and you're going to press the seam allowance towards the lining, because most likely your lining is much thinner than the outer fabric. So this will help keep the bulk away from the thickest part. So you're going to go ahead and press both sides of that so that it's nice and pressed. And then once you've pressed both of the seam allowances to the side with the lining. Then you're going to center the lining and you're going to press it nice and flat so you'll end up with a facing on both sides. This is so when we sew the belt channel to the bag and close it all up to make the channel, you won't see the lining, you'll have this nice facing. This is what the belt channel should look so far. To make my life easier when I fold everything up, I'm going to sew this bottom edge that has the 3/8 of an inch fusible fleece missing from it, baste it shut just so that those two layers stay together. Now you're going to fold down the side that doesn't have the fleece and it should line where the fleece is, and then you're going to press up that bottom edge that again doesn't have any fleece. This is going to be the back of your channel, and then the front side when you flip it over after you've finished pressing the top half down and that bottom 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter up, then the front side should just be the size of your fleece, and that's going to be the front of the channel. Now, when you orient it, you're going to orient the channel so that the top flips up, and so that bottom half, you're going to have those two creases that you just pressed, and you're going to line up that bottom of the channel with your marks for where the channel is placed. And again, when you fold that down, that becomes the quilted part is the top of the channel. You're going to measure up 1/2 inch or 1.3 centimeters from that bottom edge, and you're also going to create, I'm just marking it so that it's easier to sew, but you're going to create this X stitch across from that 1/2 inch up mark that you measured to the corner right before the crease line. And you're going to stitch up one side, starting at that 1/2 inch up part. You're going to go down one diagonal over to that other corner that you marked. You're going to go back up that side until you get to the crease, and then you're going to rotate and go back down that diagonal line until you get to the spot where you started. This is what's going to create that support for your belt channel. Once you've done, you can go ahead and get rid of any pins that you had. And then to make my life easier, again, I'm using more of that wash away tape, but you can use that or you can just pin it in place. But you're going to fold that bottom seam allowance underneath that 1/2 inch or 1.3 centimeters that you left before the stitching. So it's going to curl under between the back of the channel and the front of the back B piece, if that makes sense. And you're just going to go along and curl that under and then press it down or pin it down into place before we top stitch. I like to kind of think of it similar to a patch pocket is basically what you're trying to go for with curling that seam allowance under. To secure those raw edges, we're going to do 2 rows of edge stitching, one 1/8 of an inch, 3 millimeters from the edge, and the second row 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters away from the edge. To avoid starting and stopping and having backtacking multiple times and having it look much neater, I like to create a little box. So you're going to stitch down one side, turn, go a couple stitches, and then you're going to turn it back. Now for the second row, I like to line the very left edge of my presser foot against that row of stitching that I just did, and that helps to create that 1/8 of an inch away from the previous stitch, so 1/4 inch total. And then I continue the box and then go over just the last couple of stitches where I started, and that looks done. And then we're going to do the same thing on that top edge. Now the double row helps to create almost like a safety stitch or bar tack where it's 2 rows. So because that top of that channel is a stress point for the belt to run along, that just helps add a little bit of extra security. Before the next part, you're going to want to determine which way you want to wear the sling on which shoulder. I'm going to pin this so that it is on, the shoulder strap is on my left shoulder and the bag is on my right side of the body. If you want it on the other side, you're going to want the zipper pocket to be on the other side of the bag. So I'm going to go ahead and put it on the right side of the front, and I'm just going to pin that top in place, and then I'm going to pin the bottom notch with that bottom seam, and then the other side. Next, I'm going to pin the notches together, and then I'll go through and pin the rest in between. As it's more curved, you're going to want a couple more pins or clips, and then, but it should go together where it's all completely even. To make sure the bag is super even on both sides, you're going to sew from the center out and then the center out again on the other side. You're going to sew both sides with 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance. And when you get to the side with the pocket, we're going to sew that, catch that pocket, the corner of the pocket in the seam allowance of that side, but keep the rest of the pocket out of the way, if that makes sense. And then it's, when you're done, it's gonna look like this. So again, you're just catching that corner of the seam allowance. Now we're gonna do the exact same thing all over again, pinning the back B to the other side in exactly the same way, and you're gonna sew with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Again, you're gonna catch that little corner of the pocket into that seam allowance. Once you're done, you'll have the start of your bag, and we're ready to move on to the lining. With right sides together, you're going to sew the bottom edge of both the lining pieces C with 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance. We're going to do it exactly like we did the outer bag, but we're going to skip the top stitching this time. You're just going to press it flat, and that is enough. If you're using a thick fabric like teddy bear fleece for the lining, you're wanting to trim the pile along the seam allowance of those same edges that you removed the seam allowance of the fusible fleece from the front A, side C, and back pieces as short as possible. This is going to help reduce that bulk to make it easier to attach the strap later. If you're not, you can skip this step. Follow the exact same method as you did for the main body of the fabric to attach the front and back to the side panels of the lining. You're going to match those notches and the ends just like you did before. Now for this, the front and the back are exactly the same, so you don't need to worry about which one is which. You're going to sew all the way around one side with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance or 1 centimeter seam allowance. You'll notice I'm just going from one side to the other with this one because I feel for the lining it's not quite as critical of it being exactly 100% even on both sides. You can choose to do it where you start from the center out if you want, and then or not, it's up to you. The second side, you're going to leave a 4-inch or 10.centimeter opening that's 2.5 or 5 centimeters down from the top edge. So you sew that 2.5 centimeter first, leave that 4-inch 10 centimeter opening, and then you're going to continue as normal. That hole, it doesn't matter where the opening is that you put it on, it's just going to help you turn the bag right side out. But whichever side that you want to put it on doesn't matter. You're going to place the lining inside the main body of the bag with right sides together, and you're going to clip the front A to the lining A as well as the back B to the back lining B. And you're going to sew across both of those curved edge with 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance. Again, that opening can be in any corner that you want because it's not going to be visible once we turn everything out. It'll be hidden in the corner. You're going to take the D-ring tab P, and it's going to be in that 3/4 inch 2 centimeter strap. You're going to top stitch the open side closed with 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeter top stitching as desired, as well as that folded edge. And then you're going to take the tab and fold it in half around the D-ring, matching those raw edges. And then we're going to go ahead and top stitch that tab closed right next to the D-ring to secure it in place. The edge of my presser foot as my guide up against the D-ring to make sure it's straight, and then you're going to want to go back and forth across the strap multiple times to create a bar tack so that the D-ring is nice and secure. And when you're done, it will look something like this. If your machine is struggling to go through all of the layers, I recommend taking a mallet or hammer and hammering that to flatten it down. That'll make it much easier to sew through the thick layers. Now you're going to top stitch the safety strap Q in the exact same way as you did with the D-ring tab, with the 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeter top stitching as desired down that closed edge as well as the folded edge. Now because my machine struggled, I am using that mallet again to hit down and flatten those two ends that I'll be sewing. On one end end of the safety strap, you're going to take that 3/4 inch 2 centimeter lobster swivel hook, and you're going to fold over the strap about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters. And then you're going to secure that raw edge with a tight zigzag stitch. You want to go back and forth across it a few times to secure it. And then once you finish that, you're going to add a second one about 1/4 inch, 6 millimeters away. Again, going back and forth to help secure that strap. This distributes the stress across 2 separate seams instead of it all being on one, so that it's extra secure. Once you're done, you can clip any threads, and that's it. That's your safety strap basically done, and you're ready to set it off to the side for when you're ready to actually insert it into the bag. Taking the upper front strap, bottom E, the side without the fusible fleece is the bottom of the strap, and you're going to place the D-ring tab to the side that does have the fusible fleece and sandwich it together, right sides together, in between the upper front strap top D. And you want to make sure that the D-ring tab is extended about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters from the seam, and then you're going to sew that across that seam with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do not trim the tab. You need that overhang. You're going to orient the tab so that it goes down towards the bottom of the strap, and those extended pieces are going up towards the front of the strap. You're going to press that seam allowance open, and then that is what your D-ring should look like. Once you finish pressing, you're going to go ahead and put a box with an X reinforcing stitch on the top of those tabs. There's a lot of layers here, so be patient. On the side that had the seam allowance of the D-ring tab, I did end up, my machine was fighting me, so I ended up using the hand wheel in the parts where my machine didn't really love going through. Once I got towards the folded edge, it was okay. So have a little bit of patience when you sew this, but you're gonna sew a 3/4 2 centimeter box with the X, and that will help create extra security for the D-ring tab, so no matter what you are hanging from it, it should be super secure. I think before sewing another one of these, I will go extra hard with the mallet. That is the upper front strap complete. Now we are ready to attach it to the under front strap. You're going to line up the sides that don't have the fusible fleece or foam, and then we are going to sew with 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance all the way around 3 of the sides, leaving the side that doesn't have the foam or fleece open. Once you're done with the front strap, you're going to do the exact same thing with the back strap G, matching up the sides that don't have the foam or fleece. You're going to go sew around 3/8 of an inch, 1 centimeter seam allowance on the other 3 sides, leaving that side open to turn through. Once you're done, you're going to clip those corners, and then you're going to turn the straps right side out. This can be a little bit tricky just because of the layers, but if you take your time, I also use a point turner to help get those points nice and sharp. If you don't have a point turner, you can also use a closed end pair of the scissors or a chopstick. And then I did the same thing on the front strap. So you're going to clip those corners, and then you're going to turn it through. Again, this one's a little bit trickier because it's longer, but you'll get there. Then I fed the point turner all the way up until get that corner again nice and sharp. The scissors might not work, but the chopstick definitely would. Then once they are turned right side out, you're going to go ahead and give them a nice press flat, and that's your straps pressed. Next, you're going to cut the webbing into 3 strips per your instructions, and you're going to take the longest one that's 23 inches or 58.4 centimeters. Place one end on the right side of the back strap G, the side with the fusible fleece. Center the webbing across the width of the strap piece and lining it up with the raw edge open end of the strap, and then you're going to baste it in place. You're going to measure up 1/2 inch or 1.3 centimeters from the raw edge, and you're going to sew a 1.5 or 3.8 centimeter box and X stitch to secure the webbing to the strap to reinforce this area, as again, it'll be a high stress point. Make sure that the webbing stays centered to the strap. You're going to take the front strap and you're going to insert it into the side of the bag that has the side pocket. Again, this is the front. So you're going to take right sides together, and you're going to line up the side that has the D-ring tab to the side that has your pocket on the side C, and you're going to baste that in place so that we're ready to pin this all together. Now, this is the difficult part. This is why it's so many layers and why we removed all of the bulk ahead of time. You're going to wrap the A and B side around until you get to the center mark of where that notch is on your strap, and then you're going to pin that in place, and you're going to do the same thing on the other side, wrapping that around, and then you're going to fold the lining in the exact same way so that it lines up with the bag itself, and it'll create this nice straight line once it's all clipped together, just like this. And then you're gonna sew along that edge with a 1/2 inch or 1.3 centimeter, just to give yourself a little extra space. If you are dealing with a heavier weight pup, you're going to want to do a couple of rows of that stitching to reinforce it. Now we're going to do the exact same thing with the back strap. Again, the side with the webbing is the front side of your strap. You're going to place that with right sides together to the other side of your side C panel, and you're going to baste that in place first. And then you're going to do the same wraparound technique. You're going to wrap around the A and B pieces so that they meet in the center of that notch on that strap. And then you're going to fold the lining in the same manner so that it creates this one straight line across for all pieces. Now, the only difference is you're going to insert your safety strap in between the lining pieces. Pick one side or the other, it does not matter. It just will tuck it into the corner, and also having it centered has all of that seam allowance, so it'll be extra bulky, so you do not want that. So pick a side, doesn't matter. And then you're going to sew across with 1/2 or 1.3 centimeters across that edge, and then we're ready to turn the bag right side out through that opening that we left in the lining. I like to pull the straps out first and sort of use that to help me turn the rest of the bag right side out. Just take your time, but it should be fairly easy to birth it depending on how thick of the fabrics that you chose. And then once we turn it fully right side out, you're ready to give it a good press. Now, when I use the teddy bear fleece, I actually didn't press this because I like the way it curls up a little bit. But for the flannel, I definitely liked the pressed look. So that's up to you. Pick and choose what you want, but you'll just press all along that opening edge. And then we're ready to close that opening up. I'm going to use a 1/8 or 3 millimeter tops edge stitching there. You can also, if you want to do a more invisible look, you can hand sew it with a ladder stitch, but honestly it's going to be fairly invisible in that hidden in there, so you don't need to. A 5-inch or 12.7 centimeter piece of webbing that will become the strap keeper. If you have a slider, you don't need to do this, but you're going to fold it in half and you're going to sew back and forth a couple of times with a 1/2 inch or 1.3 seam allowance to create a loop. This is going to help keep the long adjustable tails of the straps secure, but again, if you got a slider, you don't need this. You can use the slider instead, but mine didn't come with that, so that's why we're doing that. And then once you're finished the loop, you're going to turn it right side out, and then I like to just give it a little bit of a finger press, and then you're going to take your long webbing strap that's attached to the back strap and your bag, and you're going to slide that keeper all the way down out of the way, and then you're ready for the buckle. You're going to take the male side of the buckle, which looks like this, and you're going to feed the webbing through the back part of that back part of the buckle, up and over and back down, and then through the keeper, just like that. Leave that bottom tail of the webbing raw edge for right now. Just put it off to the side for right now, and then we're going to move on to the female side of the buckle. And you're going to take that 7.5 or 16.5 centimeter piece of webbing, and you're going to take it towards the back side of the buckle, and you're going to fold it around 2 inches or 5 centimeters to the wrong side, and fold under 1/2 inch or 1.3 centimeters so that there's no more raw edge. And you're basically going to create a 1.5 or 3.8 centimeter box, and then you're going to sew across that back and forth a few times to secure it. And that is the other side of the webbing done. Going back to the front strap, you're going to measure up approximately 9 inches or 22.9 centimeters from the free end, the side that is not secured to the bag, the front strap D. With right sides facing up, you're going to pin the webbing and the female buckle with the end folded under just under 1.5 or 3.8 centimeters, centered in the center of the strap. Before you stitch it down, I would recommend just pinning it in place and trying on the bag just to make sure that the placement is good for you, just in case, depending on your height, you might want to adjust the placement as desired. But then once you're happy with it, go ahead and secure it with a 1.5 inch or 3.8 centimeter box and X stitch, just as you did with the back strap. Again, this is a stress point, so this is going to make it super secure. And once you're complete, I would go ahead and try the bag on one more time. Adjust the long strap of the attached male buckle to your desired length, and then trim off any excess. And then you're going to fold the raw edge inward 1/2 inch or 1.3 centimeters twice to create a double fold hem. And then you're going to top stitch across the folded end several times to secure it into place. At this point, you will have a finished wearable bag, and all that is left to do is the belt and the pillow insert. So to start with the belt, you're going to cut 3 more pieces of webbing for the links in the instructions. You're going to go ahead and add the heavyweight fusible interfacing. I'm using Decoville to the wrong side of one of the belt O pieces on top of the fusible foam. Now, if you notice, I cut a piece that's bigger than the belt. I then pressed it down into place, and then once it was fused, I went ahead and just trimmed it around. To me, I found that easier, but if you cut it to size and you just fuse it on, that's no problem at all as well. It was just easier. Anyways, you're going to take the 2 longer pieces of the webbing and you're going to base them to the short sides of one of your belt pieces. Doesn't matter which side, the belt is entirely symmetrical, so which side you put which side doesn't matter at this point. And then with right sides together, you're going to sew all the way around the belt pieces, sewing with 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance all the way around, leaving a 3 inch or 7.6 centimeter opening to turn the belt. And you want to make sure that you're keeping the webbing on the inside free from the seam, except for on the short ends where it is getting caught into the seam, which is why you saw me in the beginning kind of neatly fold the webbing into a line. That was just to ensure that it stayed out of the way where I didn't want to sew it. Once you've sewn all the way around except for the opening, I would recommend trimming off those corners, and then you're ready to turn it right side out. Now, because the layers are so thick, this is kind of tricky, so it will take a little bit of patience, but I did also find that using the webbing to help pull it from the inside and sort of work it that way was the easiest method of turning it right side out. Then again, I used my point turner to make sure those corners were nice and pushed out, and then you can go ahead and press it flat, turning in those corners or edges of that opening. And then I also recommend using the wash away tape or pins to keep that section closed. If this is super thick for your machine, you can just go ahead and use a ladder stitch to close that hole up. Otherwise, I recommend top stitching with 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters away from the edge all the way around the belt, and that will close up that opening as well. Again, anytime I can avoid hand stitching, I'm going to. And then lastly, just to provide a little bit of extra security to that belt strap, You're going to add a second row of top stitching about a 1/4 inch away from the edge. Again, I like to make a little box instead. That way it's extra secure. And it'll look like that when it's done. And then you're just going to do the same thing on the other side. With the back side of the belt facing up, you're going to orient the belt with the shorter length of the webbing on the left side. You're going to loop the female side of the buckle with the wrong side facing up, folding over 2 inches or 5 centimeters to the wrong side, and again folding under that 1/2 inch or 1.3 centimeters so there's no raw edge, leaving a 1.5 inch 3.8 centimeter square, and sew back and forth a couple of times to secure that, just like you did with the shoulder strap. You're going to create a second strap keeper by folding the webbing in half and sewing back and forth a couple of times with the 1/2 inch or 1.3 centimeter seam allowance to create that loop. And then once you turn the strap keeper right side out, you're going to slide that onto the long webbing strap, the one that's like 1 yard or more. Thread the webbing from the bottom of the male buckle up and over and back under the adjuster of the buckle, and then thread that through the strap keeper. Again, leave the tail raw end for now. At this point, you're going to want to try the belt on. You're going to adjust the strap length as desired. You're going to trim off any excess you don't want, and then you can go ahead and fold the raw edge inward by 1/2 inch or 1.3 centimeters twice to create that same double fold hem, and then you're going to top stitch across that folded end several times to secure. And that's it. That is your belt complete. Last but not least is the pillow insert. You're going to add the fusible foam to the wrong side of one of the pillow inserts, and then you're going to add the heavyweight fusible interfacing, in this case again the deco welt, to the wrong side of the other pillow insert, following both the manufacturer's instructions. Again, for both of these, I cut pieces that were larger than the pillow insert, and then after I fused them, I went ahead and trimmed them down to size. Now, for this, I really wanted to quilt it. You don't have to do that. If you don't want to, you can go ahead and just get straight to sewing it together. So you're going to place them right sides together. You're going to sew all the way around with 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance, leaving approximately 3 inch or 7.6 centimeters opening to be able to turn the pillow right side out. Now you can either clip corners, or you can do what I did, which I just trimmed the seam allowance down to about 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters, and then turned it right side out. And then again, using my point turner to push out all the edges so you get a nice smooth curve all the way around. And then I made sure to press everything nice and flat, get that opening how I like it. And then again, just as I did with the belt, I recommend using the wash away tape to keep that opening shut when you sew it shut. Now you can either hand sew, ladder stitch if you want. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and avoid hand stitching again and top stitch with a 1/8 of an inch 3 millimeter top stitching all the way around. Clip the edges, and then you are complete. Your bag is fully ready for your next adventure. Thank you so much for taking the time to sew along with me. I hope you and your fur baby are absolutely loving their brand new Skyler Pet Sling. If you enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any future tutorials. I've got so many ideas for pet-friendly, functional, stylish designs coming your way, so stay tuned. I cannot wait for all the adventures you and your fur baby are gonna go on. If you can, please tag me. I don't care whether your adventure is a stroll in the park, lounging at a cafe, a walk around the block. I don't care. Be sure to tag me at Hudson Houndstooth and use hashtag Skyler Pet Sling when you share. I would love to see you and your fur baby adventuring. And I cannot end this video without saying a massive thank you to my pattern testers. Your thoughtful feedback allowed me to perfect every level of this design, and I truly could not have done it without you, so thank you so much. Until next time, happy sewing!